Vinland Saga! Book 2. You know the deal because you watched the first episode. I'm going to be going through the second book of Vinland Saga, stopping at a halfway point and doing a read-through with y'all. Then, after I do that, I will continue on, finish my read-through, and then record my reaction and walkthrough of the second half. So if it seems like I don't know what's going on in the second half of the book, it's because I don't yet. For this first section of recording, I'm getting to bonus story, Ylva at work, and then I will pick it on up from there. And the reason I'm doing that is so I can give a bunch of thoughts and predictions and then see if I'm right or wrong, and you all can point and laugh at me for being so wrong. Without any further ado, let's get our Viking on! This is actually a French sword, so that's not exactly high quality content. I'm sorry, it's the little details that make a difference, and I haven't paid that. I don't have an axe. Damn it. Oh, wait, but Romans are mentioned. Hold up. Roman sword! This is a gladius, the most iconic of Roman swords. Both swords didn't show much damage from that. 3 blades just doesn't feel right on the table. There we go. That feels right. So last we saw Thorfinn's father Thors was dead, and his future looked uncertain. Though we have seen into his future, and he's gonna end up working for Askeladd, the guy who killed his father, but you know, we don't know exactly what's gonna happen between now and then. And we get a little bit of like opening setup from a narrator that says, "Pillaging of England by the Vikings, which began in the early 9th century, developed over 300 years into the War of Subjugation, aimed at deposing the Anglo-Saxon king. Vast, fertile England had long been coveted by Viking tribes." It's my best narrator voice. Is it doing it for you? I can change it up. Here, I'll try something else. Huff! 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 It's dogs chasing Thorfinn. That's the different narrator voice. I'm gonna switch to the first one. We see Thorfinn is running through the woods trying to avoid capture by what looks like English forces. He ends up wounded in the shoulder by an arrow and is found by some local villagers who are set up to not exactly be fervently in support of the war and instead are more just like, it's happening, but we're just living our best life. And of course, when they find Thorfinn, they're like, oh, look at this kid. He's just a kid and he's wounded. Let's take care of him. So they take him in and he can't speak their language. There's not a whole lot of communication between them, but it's kind of nice to see these people displaying some humanity towards our protagonist and like just being not a part of the vicious hatred between the Vikings and the English during this time. And they even feed him and clean him. And when an English scout shows up and says, "A Viking spy is in our ranks. Have you seen the boy?" The woman's like, "No, this is my son. So I haven't seen the boy." And the soldier's like, okay. And it's interesting narratively, after Thorfinn is, at least in our perspective as readers, so recently gone through such severe trauma, you assume he's just on the run from the catastrophic events we just saw, and now he's being chased down by English soldiers. The kid cannot catch a break. Talk about being in a bad situation. That night, we see Thorfinn says, you run away. In English, I believe, that's like trying to communicate broken English, and the woman and her daughter are like, wiggity wiggity, what? Thorfinn then grabs a torch and sprints off, and they shout after him, John! Because they decided to name him John. I don't like that name. Thorfinn, way better. And here we have it set up that there's actually a ship somewhere nearby, and someone says, "Where's Thorfinn's signal? Haven't seen it yet. Should be any moment now." Thorfinn, what you doing? And then they spotted on the horizon a fire, and we see Thorfinn standing in front of a blazing cabin, and the village he is at starts screaming, "Fire!" Villagers come down to try and put it out, and soldiers arrive to fight Thorfinn, the same soldier from before, and we see Thorfinn has killed multiple soldiers and is in what looks like some kind of manic fight, because he's got this face, and I'd run from a child with that face. Thorfinn kills that soldier and comes face to face with the woman who took care of him. And what was done here narratively, it's not like super deep, but it's really clever. I like that, of course, because what we just saw in the book, we're assuming Thorfinn is on the run, like totally lost, doing his best to survive, but no, the soldier was right. He is a spy, a scout, whatever you want to call him, and he's just put a signal for Askeladd and his forces to come and raid this village that was taking care of him. Wow! Are we the bad guy? We're the bad guys!
Thorfinn, the little stinker.
So we've cut already to a point where Thorfinn is with Askeladd, and I don't know, I just really appreciated that because I didn't see it coming and it was effective. Point Vinland Saga. You already got a bunch of points though. It's like so many points. I'm really enjoying Vinland Saga. Viking celebration! Oh, that's off frame. Viking celebration! No, not you. You get back in here. Is that blocking my... No, I think that's fine. A battle commences, and of course, it goes pretty easily. And the narrator returns and says, 5 years later, in 1013, King Swea of Denmark would lead his own fleet in an invasion, chasing King Ethelred of England into exile in France. In the early 11th century, the Viking Age reached its apex. The war with England paved the way, for their reign was never given a name. Now, again, I'm not super knowledgeable in English history. Despite being a pretty big history nerd my whole childhood, I just never got into English history, so how accurate all of this is, I can't attest to. I've been told a lot of the big beats of this story in terms of what we see are fairly accurate, and many of the names totally legit. So beyond that, don't listen to what I have to say. I'm just speculating. It's like the 9th time I was introduced to an Edward or a Henry, I was just like, I don't care anymore. English history. No offense to the English people in the audience. It's not my favorite. August 1013 AD, the Danish Viking fleet led by King Sweyn invaded England up the river of Humber. You can't say Humber and sound badass. Humber. Nope, doesn't work. At Gainsborough, the 5 nearby towns quickly surrendered. The main force marched south over land, cutting across England while pillaging the Mercia region, en route to assault on Wessex, the seat of English power at the time. Since the invading force simply marched around the fortified boroughs, the English system of fortresses and defenses failed to serve its purpose. However, the Viking progress paused for a time at the trading town of London. I know that name! No, okay, obviously London wasn't London yet, but that is London, so that's cool. Also, I love the fact that the Vikings just went around their fortifications. You have the English like, hey, stop!
I'm just gonna go around. I'm
stop!
not interested in fighting.
Fight us here! No, fight
the more vulnerable.
here! Fight! No, stop! But we see at the Battle of London there is a big bridge, and Askeladd is leading an attacking force that seems to be trying to figure out how to get the Vikings that the English hired on their side to come back to their side. As an envoy is being sent, though, we see Askeladd tells Thorfinn to get the commander's head, as he tends to do, and promises him a duel in return. When the envoy arrives at the bridge, though, they basically say, like, stop firing! We want to talk to your commander. We're like old bros. And the commander comes up and goes, oi! It's been a long time, Floki. You're looking well. This guy's name's Thorkel. A lot of Thors. And they basically are like, Thorkel, you're one of us. Like, come on. We're gonna win. You know we're gonna win. Why don't you just come on our side? We'll pay you double what the English are paying you. And Thorkel's response essentially boils down to, look, good offer, Floki, you're cool, I like you, but I'm tired of winning easily. And fighting on the English side means, like, I have to work more for it. And I respect the hell out of Thorkel. Thorkel is awesome. He just got so tired of winning. He's agreeing to fight for the other side so he can just be like, now it's a struggle. My boy is bored in war. And to end the conversation, he picks up a massive boulder and just chucks it down on the envoy ship. They have to like rapidly evade and sail back, and Thorkel shouts after them, Drat, just missed it. Floki, go and ask Sweyn something for me. Does it ever get boring always being on the winning side? How is this guy alphaing by being on the losing side? I've never seen this before. Someone being like, we're losing, which means we're actually struggling, you're winning, which means you're not. So we see the king just orders the siege to resume, and we come back to a battle that really is just only happening so we can see Thorfinn's attempt to try and kill Thorkel. Thorkel. Who's the real Thor? Well, we all know Thor's is the real Thor. The fight is pretty great. I like how they have the detail of the guy is so tall that Thorfinn can't actually easily reach the vulnerable points he likes to go for, the neck and under the arms. But he is devious enough to successfully stab Thorkel through the hand. Thorkel then grabs him and starts whipping him around like a rag doll. Askeladd sees this and is like, no, that's not going well. Anyway, it's time to retreat. We're gonna leave him. F that guy. We're out of here. And it just kind of reemphasizes that, like, Askeladd doesn't really care about Thorfinn much, and it For some reason that hurts. I don't know why I want him to be a father figure to him. No, that's horrible. No, but like someone needs to look after the guy. Watching the attackers retreat, Thorkell goes, "Hey, oh drat, I just take a few seconds to enjoy a fight and the whole battle's over. Looks like they've left you for dead. Poor thing, you put up such a good fight too. Uh-oh, are you dead?" And at this point, Thorfinn grabs his knife and swings to cut off the fingertips of Thorkell. And Thorkell asks, "Warrior, I would hear your name." "Thorfinn, son of Thors," Thorfinn replies. I feel like I had to clarify that. Probably not. To which Thorkell says, "Thors? Hey, when you say Thors, do you mean..." And Thorfinn jumps off the bridge to save himself. Aw, there he goes. "What's the call, Captain? He's getting away. Should we shoot? Let him go. He can live another day." And then he calls after Thorfinn, "Ahoy, Warrior Thorfinn! I enjoyed our little fight. We should do it again. We'll finish it for good next time. That's a promise, you hear?" I switched through like 3 different voices there, but Thorkell, best character maybe I've ever come across ever in anything. He is amazing. We see back at the main camp, the king is talking to Askeladd and other people in charge of this siege, and he essentially says that the prince will be left in charge of the siege, and they'll just leave forces at London for however long it takes to win the siege, a very common tactic for sieges of the time. And we see the boats on the river attacking this bridge actually pull back entirely. Thorfinn meets up with Askeladd again, and it's established that Thorfinn definitely does not consider himself really a part of this army, which I really do want to emphasize because it seems like the text is making that important. He even says it later on, right around the point that I stopped. He really does not want him to be associated with the people he's fighting with, so I'm emphasizing it because the text did. We get a dream sequence for chapter 20 in a segment called Ragnarok, where we see he as a child in the youngest state we ever saw him is with his father yet again, who is trying to convince him to abandon his revenge nonsense. It's not the future he would have wanted for Thorfinn, and the dream ends by turning into a nightmare where he sees his home village as being attacked by invaders and he watches his father die riddled with arrows once again. Thorfinn wakes up in a barn and he watches a woman being assaulted by some of his comrades, kind of showing, I think, why exactly he doesn't want to be considered a part of this awful, awful, awful group, and he walks off to be on his own. We see some of the soldiers that he's with are even like fighting each other, being very cliche Viking stereotypes, which I think Vinland Saga can get away with in moments like this because they've done a really good job of showing a well-rounded end to Viking culture, much better than a lot of the media depictions of Viking we often get. So having it kind of be like this, no, here is Vikings being Vikings, but we know there's some nuance beyond this, is more justifiable than a lot of the times we see Vikings. But while he's alone, he runs into Askeladd, and they start having a really interesting conversation, where they talk about how Christians are predicting the end of the world. And Askeladd goes into this long conversation about how it feels like the twilight of men is on the horizon. The Christians are saying it's going to be over in about 20 years. Ragnarok is something that they still believe in. In this perspective, from what the Vikings had, they view the Roman civilization as like greater than anything that's around right now, and they were wiped out by the Saxons, and now they're here to wipe out the Saxons, and it feels like a regression of progress, and so to them it makes complete sense that they might be near the end of the world. And that's Vinland Saga, why are you getting all cool and deep on me? I like it. This conversation, though, is interrupted by a writer who shows up and at first is trying to get Askeladd in trouble because Askeladd is not doing what he's supposed to be doing. He's raiding a village when he's supposed to be, like, moving off. And at this point, I thought, Askeladd's gonna kill this guy. And guess what Askeladd did? Apparently, the siege on London has gone terribly. It's been broken by Thorkell, who has also taken the prince prisoner. And instead of just after breaking the siege staying in the fortifications of London, Thorkell has taken 500 men and is chasing the retreating men with the prince in tow because he wants more battle. Thorkell, I love you. You're not as badass as Thor's. At this moment, though, Askeladd beheads the messenger, fulfilling my prophecy from before, and says, "At this moment, we're heading to rescue Highness Prince Canute." I did my best. "We face Thorkell and his 500, but we will seek the help of no other men. This is where we make our gamble. Prince Canute is the heir to the Danish throne, the first in the line to the monarchy. You can imagine what we would get. The conqueror of both Denmark and England will pay a dear price for the boy, and no other son of a bitch will beat us to him." And when one of Askeladd's officers questions this move, he says, "This is the twilight of the world, Bjorn. Might as well raise some hell." Oh, it's a good line. We pick up in the woods watching Thorkell's forces kind of harass the prince and making some rude observations about English women, and I'll leave it at that. And then they switch over to making some rude observations about Jesus, and I won't skip over that because it's kind of funny, they say. Besides, I saw a wooden statue of that Jesus fellow in the London chapel. He looked a right pansy, ain't that the truth? Nothing but skin and bones. One swing from Thor's hammer would pound him flat. What good is he in battle? Nah, I heard he was a wizard, walking on water and making bread out of thin air. Awful boring magic if you ask me. I mean, the gods of Asgard all have flying horses. Exactly, like Odin and Thor, they're much better. I don't know if this is a historically accurate type of conversation that the Vikings would have in this time, but I really hope it is.
Come on, be a Christian.
Okay, but what was like Jesus' deadlift though? Thorkel responds to this by saying, "Now let's not be too hasty, boys. We ought to take the opinion of an actual Christian into account. Hey there, Prince. Who do you think's mightier, Jesus or the gods of Asgard?" And a monk is actually with the prince, as well as an officer we saw expressing doubt about the prince's capabilities to maintain the siege, which, by the way, turns out he was right. This conversation concludes with Thorkel just kind of reemphasizing his faith in the idea of Valhalla and, dying in battle to join the warriors of old and all that cool stuff. The religions are shifting and molding, and this was a time where Christianity was battling with a lot of other religions for dominance, and I really like that that's being incorporated into the narrative. Again, I don't know how accurate it is, I want to emphasize that, but super enjoyable. The priest has a bit of an outburst where he says, "I can see him! Father above! God in heaven, is that you? Your child, your eternal servant stands faithfully here. Please, show me the answers to my delusions. Show me your love." To which Thorkel starts laughing and says, "I tell ya, it kills me every time. Never saw a priest drown in booze like him. Seems like being a Christian is hard to deal with." All this ends though when Thorkel calls for a spear and chucks it in the woods, hitting a soldier lying in wait. It appears they are in an ambush, and the forces from London call out, "We are offering you rebels a final mercy. Release his highness and Ragnar at once, and we will grant you your lives." Thorkel, think very, very hard about your position. You have no choice in the matter. The reason that they trail off is like Thorkel has just released the prince, and the officer, he's like, "Yeah, there you go." And they're like, "What? We said we have 2,000 men, and we threatened you, and you just gave in?" I need to consult a mathematician. Why do you do that?
Carry the one and remember the two. Thorkel, the prince is released with 2,500. Oh. He wanted to fight.
Thorkel calls out, "Well done, men of Ragnar. You've served admirably. There's your precious Prince Canute. Safe and sound. So what are you waiting for? Come give us your worst." The officer says like, "Oh, don't start a battle right now. I know you don't have 2,000 men. This is a very bad call. Let's just get out of here, retreat, you have the prince." But Thorkel keeps harassing them and actually charges. Despite them having said, "We have 2,000 men," and him only having 400, he's like, "Let's go, bro!" And it goes very poorly for the Londoners. Thorkel only has 500, they only have 400, so when he charges, the lie of 2,000 becomes very apparent and goes super poorly for the London forces. But we cut to Askeladd, and he is with a bunch of barrels and said, "Wind's right. Here we go, boys. Set it up according to plan." Just as it looks like the London forces are going to be completely overwhelmed and massacred, Thorkel stops his butchering and goes,
A kind of smelly smell. A smelly smell that smells smelly.
"Do you smell something besides the blood?" One of his men responds, I do. It's not entrails. What is it? All I smell is blood." "No, I know that smell. Charcoal hut upwind?" But then they all turn and see a massive fire is started, and Askeladd is looking down on them. And I really enjoy this because Askeladd has already been set up to be a cheat, a liar, a little snake, and he is doing that to Thorkel, which makes me, as a reader, be like, I'm on Thorkel's side. He's doing a straight up fight. I can respect that. Aslan's doing like an underhanded move to totally just enrich himself and get the prince so he can trade it back for glory. Yeah, I don't like war. I don't like any side here, really, but if I was observing this, I'd be like, he's being honorable. Aslan's being snake. You little snake. You little sneaky snake. Here we actually cut though back into Iceland, where we see Thor's wife and daughter are being given his belongings, and the crew that was with him when he died are telling him Thor's sacrificed himself for our lives, and yet we somehow lost Thorfinn as well. Helga, Ylva, forgive us. I have no words that can replace them. And that is where we get to bonus story. And depending on how long editing this takes me, you will either be getting the second half of the book in this video as well. Look at the runtime. You probably know by now. I remembered that I have an axe. It won't stick, but I have an axe. So it's pretty late in the day, and I was worried that I was not going to be able to fit in this second half with editing, but I'm willing to stay up late editing to get this done right. And also, this might be a lot of pages, but not too many things happen that I really need to get in depth about. It's quite a bit of setup for what is to come, which is by no means a criticism. Every story needs its setup periods. But let's go ahead and start getting through the meat so we can get through the setup. So this fire creates a gargantuan wave of smoke that chokes out the battlefield, and Askelin is hoping he can send Thorfinn to snatch the prince from the battlefield. Thorkell is able to deduce, though, that there must be a third force present, because with this wild fire out of nowhere being amplified by all this fuel, there's no way the people coming to save the prince would do that. We see the prince is with his officer who's trying to get him through the smoke. They're almost wounded by one of their own men in the confusion, and then Thorkinn's men actually show up. Thorfinn, though, drops into the middle of this and is about to have a showdown with men on all sides trying to get at the prince. After one successful kill, though, Thorkell shows up to challenge Thorfinn, but he says, "Thorfinn! You're Thorfinn, right?" He's so excited. Aha! It is you, Thorfinn. I just knew we'd meet again. And he shows Thorfinn quite a bit of respect. And he's like, I knew your father. He's the one warrior who was better than me. And I can't really say whether or not he's being truthful or just trying to give Thorfinn some nice respect about his father. I imagine he's telling the truth. I have no reason to believe he's not. I would like to see a showdown now between Thors and Thorkinn. Thorfinn can watch Thors and Thorkinn fight. Thors! Thorkell is so confident, he actually just says, look, why don't you take the prince? We're all heading towards the same direction anyway, right? Towards your king. Awkward insert here to just say yes. For some reason at this point, my brain decided to start calling Thorkell Thorkinn. Not sure about that. He ends the scene by saying, try and escape. Let's have a little bit of cat and mouse. If you get away from me, you win, but I'm gonna be hunting you, and that's good fun. And if there's not an awkward insert in a video like this, it's not really me, it's an imposter. I'm being and like the cojones to be able to do that. I love Thorkinn so much. It's really interesting to have these juxtaposition of characters where it seems like the factions which side they fall on don't really dictate whether or not they're a good or bad person. And I think that's an incredibly realistic representation of warfare during this time. People got caught up in sides, and the grand political desires of those up top had very little to do with the actual morality of the people beneath them. And people just got swept up and forced into these terrible, terrible conflicts. And it's rare to see a story really capture that so well. And it's the first one I've seen capture it so well in manga. Berserk, it's just kind of like, everyone's terrible. This, it's like, some people are good. We see that when the prince is brought before Aslan, they take their helmet off after the officer kind of chews out Aslan for clearly setting up this situation and taking advantage of it, but they are in Aslan's protection now, so they have to just accept that. The prince takes off their helmet, and it's a very effeminate looking man. Some of the soldiers make comments about this, and it's kind of just accepted and they move on. We do see Aslan, though, does approach an old man in a ferry and give him a letter saying, find anyone of authority on the other side. And the fisherman's like, all right. And they take some money and go on off. It seems that Thorkinn's men, though, are catching up. In fact, they're so close that scouts find Aslan's men. Some comments are made about how the prince doesn't look like a king, they seem weaker, and we don't see a single word said from the prince this entire time. But after a longer stretch of traveling once again, there is a moment where Aslan is walking through mists and he sees two shrouded figures in the distance. Some of his men speculate, is this like mist wraiths? What's going on? But no, when he gave that ferryman the message, they went across a body of water and brought reinforcements from Wales. These reinforcements provide ships that, with Thorkinn just on their heels, they're able to pull off across this body of water and officially separate them from those who are pursuing them, because Thorkinn can't just cross this body of water without ships. He needs to go all the way back to get ships, so they have a clear stretch of time now to get back to where they need to go. But this is a weaker kingdom, and people who are afraid with what the Danes and the Saxons can do, so they have this situation now where a prince is in their midst, and they try to use this leverage to make the prince agree to a non-aggression pact. The officer stands up for the prince and is like, how dare you ask of this? And the prince won't even say any words, in fact kind of cowers behind this officer. So it's this situation where it's like, okay, maybe this will happen, but like, awkward. And pausing the narrative real quick, there's some interesting conversations here happening between the monk and the Northman about things like love and more about faith. It's interesting, and I think just supposed to be a representation of a lot of the cultural shift and cultural diffusion that was happening at the time, and I want to spend like an entire video talking about it, but it's not really the appropriate place now. I just want to take a moment to say this is not meant to replace the reading experience of Vinland Saga, and there's a lot of stuff like this that's rich in terms of how much there is to talk about, but I'm just kind of doing a narrative overview. And as someone who doesn't know where the story's going, I don't always know where to focus. So please keep that in mind, and I encourage you, if you haven't read these books for yourself, to read them. This is supposed to be meant to be a refresher or something complimentary along with it, or for new readers, something to maybe sell you on it. But that's all I'm going to say, continuing on. But as they are traveling through Wales with this one smaller kingdom protecting them, they run into another force of Welshmen, and after some arrows are exchanged, a halt is called to the action, and instead some diplomacy, where once again, Askelin tries to get the prince to step forward and do some grah, rah, 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 to like cow the people who are attacking them, but they refuse and will not talk in front of crowds. When the prince is kind of like cowering once again though, we see this officer step up hard to defend them, and it shows their loyalty is clear and established to this prince. So finally, Askelin goes himself to talk to this Welshman. And while talking to this leader of other Welshmen, I will stop here to actually get into the detailed conversation that happens between Askelin and this person, because I think it's incredibly important, so let's go ahead and get on into that. Askelin, your name was. I sympathize with your plight, but we simply can't have this. A message out of the blue demanding passage through our borders and provisions, we cannot leap to your aid. Even the smallest kingdoms has to save face. What can Baching, I don't know how to say that, expect to see in return this timely assistance? The exchange needs to happen in equal footing. We can't have our people thinking our king is afraid of a mere 100 Danesmen. Askelin responds, of course you would lose face acceding to our request without recompense. I apologize for my lack of forethought. And the Welshman who's already helping them steps in and says, it was I who wrote the message to you. As I stated, I did not elaborate on the terms of the deal for the purpose of discretion. I read the letter, Catanius. What do you offer that is so sensitive? Is it possible that the contents of my offer will lead to battle, Asir? To which Asir, the leader of the Welshmen who stopped them, says, please don't tease me like that. I'm not foolish to think our humble country could anger the king of Denmark and survive. Askelin's like,
Just making sure.
We cut to Askelin's second in command, who remarks during this time that he's been with Askelin the longest of anyone in his crew, and he still knows remarkably little about the guy, and this is purely just set up for what is to come next. We cut back into after the deal has clearly been told to Asir, and he says, this is rather difficult to accept, but too far-fetched for a lie. To which Britannia says, he's of the direct line. Lida's son. You have my word on that. Askelin has the blood of the greatest of the Roman Celtic leaders running in his veins. And Asir's like, meaning that you're not a Dane? I am half Welsh, half Nordic. My father, Olaf, once raided the coast of Wales and took my mother, Lida, as his concubine. She gave birth to me. But I had always heard that the bloodline of the hero of Old Britannia had died out. You claim you are truly the descendant of the great Atreus? We get a little, like, professor's note here saying, Atreus, a military leader of Britannia, the Celtic predecessor to England who lived in the 5th and 6th century. According to Welsh historical accounts of the year 516, the invading Saxons, who later became the English, were soundly crushed by Artorius' army at the Battle of Bodden Hill, thus bringing peace to Britannia. He formed the basis for the legend of King Arthur, as it is known today. Interesting. Today I learned. Do you have evidence to lend credence to this tale? Asir asks. To which the other Welshman says, I do. I met him when he was a lad of 14, on his first visit to the Wales, with his mother, Lida. And we see a young Askelin saying, Mother dies soon, sick, said once to come home, I bring. Askelin finishes, she was an unlucky woman. My father kept her trapped in his bedroom for most of her life, and when she fell sick, she was sent to the stables. And here we get Askelin's apparently big final vision laid out. Yes, he is actually loyal to this bloodline of his, and his plan is to get in a position where he has a lot of leverage over this prince he's saving, so that then he can affect the politics of the people who are doing harm to his actual people in his mind. And as he puts it, I could be a flag bearer in the cause against the reactionary elder prince when the matter of succession is raised. If we can plop that sickly prince's soft ass on the throne, I could be in a position important enough to dictate the direction of Denmark's politics. And Asir starts laughing and says, I like you. Such audacity. Few men would dare to plot such an ambitious career. And after a bit more, this ends with Askelin saying, I despise the Danes. So now, Thorfinn doesn't identify with these people, and neither does Askeladd. So his party is allowed to move through this country as long as they give up their swords, and they do so. Except for, of course, Thorfinn, who's like, I don't have to listen to your orders, and keeps his weapon, as well as the prince's officer, so they keep their weapons, and Thorfinn has direct confrontation with the prince by saying, like, you're pathetic and can't even speak, and the prince is like, I just choose my words carefully, with a couple other excuses, to which Thorfinn calls out and goes, oh, okay, you are at least smart enough to make up excuses. After a long stretch of travel, though, winter has come early and harsh, and they are no longer in these lands that are actually helping them through. We see Askeladd is leading his group into a random village to just attack it and steal it for food, following his MO to a T. I did forget to mention something important here, where the family that we have a brief cut-in with that lives in this village, again, is talking about Christianity, heaven, hell, and the parents are using hell to scare their children into behaving as Christian parents often do. And it's just really interesting to see these religious themes grow within the text far beyond what I thought they'd be. I was wrong in the first book where I thought it would just be a curiosity kind of playing out in the background. Instead, it seems to be the most relevant thematic topic being brought up again and again and again, and now I'm at the point where I'm just really excited to see what it's going to develop into for our characters. The monk tries to warn the villagers screaming out in English, but he is quickly stopped. We see a little girl has left the village and is on the outskirts and sees Askeladd's men coming in for this attack. And sparing you some very gory details, Askeladd doesn't back down after finding these people barely have enough rations to get themselves through the winter. He rounds them all up and, justifying it to himself as essentially mercy killing, butchers this entire village so they won't starve to death in the winter, and so they won't actually report what exactly happened here. He thinks he killed every witness, but that girl got away. And then they take their food. And this little girl is now kind of left as a witness to Askeladd's great crime of just obliterating a town. And once again, Christianity is brought up here as the monk is threatened for him trying to give his warning. And on top of that, we see the little girl who managed to get away is asking God whether or not he has received her relatives yet. And it's emotionally impactful, man. And that is where book 2 ends. Quite a bit of politicking, quite a bit of setup. I don't think I necessarily liked this book as much as I liked the first, but it's not much further down. I am digging VINLAND SAGA. I am so happy this won the poll. You guys understood my taste. And yeah, absolutely, this is something that I am looking forward to reading and reviewing here on the channel for you. And you might see an uptick in the amount of times I come to summarize VINLAND SAGA in this style, because it's just such a joy to do. For those of you who are wanting Berserk, though, that will be back in October. I just needed a little bit of a mental break for very obvious reasons. And Chainsaw Man, I hope to have wrapped up by the end of October. So we're getting through these, and we're getting through them well. These are a major pain in the booty to get done, though, so any support is greatly appreciated. Likes, shares, subscribes, all that fun stuff. And of course, like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here. And have a good one, y'all. Peace.